So guys, it's me, Charmander, and today we're going to be reacting to the Gears of War Explain. Now, I love Gears of War, and the problem with Gears of War, you can't just say, freaking the game just takes place here and there, which is obviously, everyone knows that, but do you know, because they have, like, these little things collectibles who explain more of the story. So if you don't have all that and you don't read the comments, you don't know what's going on. So yeah.
The Gears of War series, or just Gears as it's now known, might have a muscly exterior filled to the brim with testosterone, but if you can get past all that and the cover-based shooting, the wars are steeped in shadowy backdoor politics, and a few obsessed with forcing the human race to take the next step. Though this is heavily hinted at, a lot of the lore is relegated to collectibles and those super slow chats that Marcus loves to have between battles. Alongside comics and books, this wider lore really makes the Gears universe pop. The mainstream reputation of the franchise, the part only concerned with shooting monsters until they're no more, then chainsawing their remains, that helped them propel Gears into video game legend. However, Epic and the Coalition always sowed far more seeds into the background. And while it be quite some time until we get a conclusion of this trilogy, now is a better time than any to brush up on everything so far. Why is Sarah always consumed by war? Why is Marcus in prison at the beginning? And how does Kate play into all this? I'm Ben Ray from WarCulture.com, and this is The Wars of Gears of War Explained. Now, even though the of war part of the Gears of War franchise has been effectively dropped, this series will always be steeped in war until the very end. At the start of it all came a 79-year conflict that saw the inhabitants of Serra tear themselves apart, all in the name of the planet's natural resources. The two superpowers of Serra, the Coalition of Ordered Governments and the Union of Independent Republics, both wanted whatever they could get their hands on. But in the end, it all came down to the control of Imulsion, located under the planet's surface in the Hollow. This could be refined into fuel to power both sides. Of course, none could agree to share, and both would go head-to-head for almost 2 generations, effectively running each other dry. Not only were there massive casualties on both sides from the war, but a vast number of the population was infected with a condition known as rust lung. There were many critical battles during the 79 years, but the decider of the whole thing came down to the battle at Aspho Fields. This was the battle where Marcus Phoenix became a hero and a legend amongst the COG. At this battle, the COG stole the Hammer of Dawn plans from the UIR and gained the advantage. But thanks to a scientist of the COG known as Niles and his experiments, peace wouldn't last for long. For most of the Gears of War series, Niles is one of the more elusive characters, and the oldest by far. He is one of the few to be alive pre-Pendulum Wars, as most of the life on Serra, in Gears, was born during that 79-year conflict. His original focus was to cure rust lung, which was a condition brought on by mining for Imulsion, which eventually killed many who refined it. But it didn't take long for his acts to become more sinister. The player never meets Niles in living form, but instead in Gears 2 and 5, they interact with an AI construct that had been programmed to replicate himself. This would serve to preserve his soul and ensure that he could keep experimenting decades past his death. As for him, his biological form meant nothing in the face of his new creations and superior race. He ran the New Hope facility and the labs at Mount Kadar. Here is where he would create the Sires, discover Mira, and create the Locust Horde. Though for many years, even after his death as an AI, he still fought for his creations and go against the last surviving humans on Serra. All that and even try and turn Kate into their new queen. Imulsion is the key to all the pain and suffering on Serra. Not only is it basically the sole reason for the Pendulum Wars on the planet, but as noted earlier, gave Niall the excuse he needed for an ample supply of test subjects. Many inhabitants on the planet and even the player thought that Queen Mira was behind the subterranean race. But no, they were all one man's twisted creations. The cover-up was that he was meant to cure the Imulsion poison miners of rust lung. Being based at New Hope, Niles would keep his actions secret and conduct genetic experimentation on the miners' children. He would infect these children with Imulsion, later discovering that this liquid would break down their cells, leaving them to slowly degenerate. But as he put it, he was creating gods for them. A byproduct of all this was the Sires, which came about after he spliced human DNA with that of the creatures which lived in the Hollow. One test subject, Mira, would be so resistant to the Imulsion that eventually with her stem cells and the Sires, the Locusts were finally created. This meant that in the Mount Kadar secret laboratory, Niles would help plunge the planet into another 17 years of war. Once leaving Mount Kadar for the Hollow, war wasn't the first thing on the Locust's mind, being particularly sensitive to certain levels of light and built vast cities there of their own. Mira became queen of her people and led them for 7 years before the war broke out, with the leftover humans on the surface. 2 years before Emergence Day, Queen Mira would seek out the help of a human scientist known as Adam Phoenix. Adam fought in the Pendulum Wars for many years, but when the opportunity came, he traded in his armor for a lab coat. He endeavored to help Mira with rampant Lambency infection spreading throughout the Hollow. Because the Locust was so uniquely tied to the emulsion, Adam failed to come up with a solution that wouldn't in turn kill them as well. In a desperate bid to escape the Hollow, the Locust led by Mira had no choice but to erupt through the planet's surface and attack the humans. This wasn't a selfish war of conquest like the Pendulum Wars. No, this was all to escape the emulsion consuming her people. Just 6 weeks after the Pendulum Wars had finally ended, and both the COG and UIR laid down their weapons, in the bloodiest conflict to date, Emergence Day was right around the corner. Kicking humanity while it was down was an understatement. Throughout this, humanity would be shattered, and the remainder of the species would be divided into the COG, which went headfirst against the Locust, UIR holdouts which were in no state to fight, and finally, the Stranded. These were humans sick of fighting and wanted to live under no ruling, though eventually the COG would conscript anyone that could stand and hold a weapon. And the most notable of these would be Dizzy Wallen. The COG used weapons such as the light mass missile and the light mass bomb, but they would fail to bring the Locust down, and each side grew weaker as the years followed. Not even the war hero Marcus along with his team of Dom, Coltrane and Baird could deal with this. They just kept coming. Cities would be covered in darkness due to krill storms led by General Ram, whilst another Locust leader, Scourge, sank entire cities with a giant rift worm. It was a stalemate of epic proportions, and even though the COG were outmatched, they kept holding out until the real threat emerged. On a scale of events, the Pendulum Wars brought humanity to its knees, and the Locust one damn near finished them off. But the Lambent pandemic threatened to consume both sides, and all the life on Serra. This all came thanks to greed. Human greed. A relatively controllable condition known as Rustlung eventually grew in the shadows and under the surface of the planet to the point where there was nowhere safe anymore. Humanity had to go into hiding or try and keep on the move, with ships like the CNV Sovereign. This is where Marcus and the last of the COG would stage their operations. But eventually, even the seas weren't safe from the Lambent. Effectively, this universe's version of a zombie outbreak, Lambent consumed all the organic matter that it came into contact with, and turned its hosts into slaves. Much like the hive mind connection that Mira had to the Locust, but this time, world domination was on the menu. Falling back to the Anvilgate Fortress, the end was near for everyone. Hoffman made a final stand at this old COG base, as Delta Team led by Marcus fought their way to Adam Phoenix, who was meant to be dead, but if alive, could finally stop Lambency. The emulsion countermeasures weapon would go on to stop the Lambent once and for all, but take down the Locust as well, sealing them in a near indestructible crystallized coating. As a result of his exposure with Lambency, Adam would also succumb to the weapon. In a last gasp of defiance, Mira would gloat about Adam's death and the fact he could only make doomsday weapons, though this was a bad idea in front of Marcus, as he stabbed her with Dom's knife, a friend he had just lost, this killing off the former queen for good, and finally put an end to all the fighting. Humanity now had a tomorrow. Even though that might have been a satisfying end to the story, the fight would eventually return in the form of an old enemy, but with a new name. 25 years had passed since the Lambent and Locust were defeated in one fell swoop. But in their place, the swarm awoke. The crystallized shells that encased them for so many years helped these creatures grow stronger, much like the transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly. The swarm woke up in many disused mines on Serra. They were here because this was the best solution the COG could come up with to dispose of them. Similar to the Lambent, but on a smaller scale, they would collect humans and convert them into matter for the swarm effort. Thanks in part to Snatchers, once a human was caught and placed into a pod, it was pretty much game over. Apart from one Marcus Phoenix, who escaped thanks to the help of his son, JD. Unlike the Locust, this new threat was out for blood and wanted to control the planet. They would trample the humans and even take control of their DBs, which were created by Damon Baird. Originally, their purpose was for construction, though like everything in Gears of War, they were eventually used for warfare. The war didn't fully kick off until Kate Diaz, daughter of Reina Diaz, found her mother and had to kill her by unhooking her from the swarm. Also, she fought, but it wasn't over yet. The swarm would go on to evolve but had the desire for a queen. They wanted to be led, just like the Locust once were. After they failed to get their hands on Kate, Reina was plugged in and became their new queen. In the events that followed, it became clear that she was daughter of Mira. And as every Locust had a connection to her, so did the swarm to Reina. As Niles put it, the Locust horde was genetically designed to withstand generational conflict, unlike the humans who now stood on the brink of extinction. The events of Gears 5 took place over 4 months, as now the swarm have surpassed the the humans as the dominant species on Serra, even though none of this is to the fault of the current generation. They're just paying the price for the greed of the past. After the final battle in Gears 5, most of the Cog cities have been attacked or completely destroyed, and now humanity is on the edge of extinction once more. Unlike the events of the Lambent pandemic, this isn't a three-way fight, and the Cog have nowhere to turn. So will Kate, Marcus, and the rest of the Cog be able to fight off yet another extinction event, or will greed finally catch up with the humans? For that, we'll have to wait for the conclusion in Gears 6. So that is the Wars of Gears of War explained. Did you enjoy this deep dive into the world of Gears, and the brief history of what happened, all the way up?
Yes. That was good. That was a good A.